Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping in to an IPA from Anchorage Brewing Company in Anchorage, Alaska. This specific IPA is a standard IPA, but it's been double dry hopped, and they used Citra and Strata hops. And this one also, yet again, has added phantasm powder. 6.4% ABV on this one, and it's called Beneath the Water. As per usual, they have some really cool can art. I'll try to rotate it this way. It starts with the upper half of a woman and then splits into this creepy skeleton monster lower half of the body. I'm not sure how to describe it, but it is very cool looking can art. So we've had one or two of their IPAs that have been brewed with phantasm powder. And again, if you didn't catch those, phantasm powder was developed by scientists in New Zealand, and it is created from the skins of Sauvignon Blanc, grape skins, and it's this kind of pungency or aromatic that pops massive aroma out of beers. So it's not related to hopping, it's actually from a grape skin, but has this really neat effect in beers. So we're using our nice all-purpose glass today, which works well for many beer styles, including IPAs. So we're going to get this poured right in the glass. Nice, lovely, bright yellow color here. This one is not seeming to have a problem forming a head, so I'm going to slow it down just a bit, be a bit more gentle here. And we can probably get the whole beer in the glass. Even while that head is still forming, it's getting close, getting close. Okay, yeah, we'll get the whole thing in there. That's excellent. Ooh, wow, yeah. I can already tell you, this is just a standard IPA, and the aroma is positively jumping out of the glass. I mean, it is massive, massive, bold, pungent aroma. Visually, yeah, this one looks a little bit hazy. They didn't classify it as a hazy or a New England, but it's definitely got a haze to it. It is occluded. In terms of what the carbonation is doing in this one, I can see a good mix of different size bubbles. There is a lot of medium size, so I don't know how long that head's going to stick around, but it does visually look quite nice. Let's get right up over it for a sniff. There is a lot of citrus popping out of this one. Tangerine, grapefruit, orange, a little bit of lemon. Really dominant. Slight suggestions of tropical fruit, though it's a little indiscernible. It's largely dominated by citrus aromatics. And being that they use citra hops in there, I'm not surprised. They tend to have big, bold pungency in terms of aroma, and they are dominated by citrus aroma and indeed flavors in the flavor profile, as well as some other underlying traits. A lot of earthiness you tend to get, certainly a high alpha acid content hop. So we'll see just how bitter forward this one is, but it looks fantastic. Yeah, that head already kind of settled out of the way. It is what it is. I expected with those larger effervescence coming up it might, but it does have a nice little pad floating on top. So we're just going to jump right in, see what this one's about. Oh yeah, that's a very nice IPA. That's very nice indeed. So first thing I can tell you, weight and texture wise. Weight wise, this feels kind of medium light. It doesn't even feel as weighty as you would expect for just 6.4% ABV on an IPA. It's not super hefty. It's not a heavy beer at all. Texture wise, mouthfeel wise, it's got a lot more resistance than like the lighter body feels. So it's got a good bit of resistance. It feels basically appropriate for about 6.5% ABV. This one, as is pretty common with Anchorage's IPAs, agitation on the palate does get it quite creamy. So it feels even more thick as you're moving across the palate than it otherwise would. Texturally, it's very, very nice. So a little bit of a disparity between the weight of the body and the thickness of the mouthfeel, but together it feels quite nice on the palate. In terms of flavor profile, when you swallow this one, you get this nice earthy sense of bitters that came through. And I did expect that with Citra. Strata can add some of those elements as well. But even though this one smells very, very citrus dominant, the flavor profile is very earthy. You know, we talk about this a lot. The Fuggle British hop is that classic earthy quality I'm talking about with a hop flavor profile. That's not a high alpha acid content hop, averages, 4 to 5%, but it has this very nice earthy profile that lends itself well to many, many beer styles. And certainly in an IPA, it works well. And I find often that the earthy kind of driven hop varieties tend to make the bitter presence a bit more pronounced than if you get something that's more citrus dominated or kind of floral dominated. You often also get that with those very pine and tar and resin dominated hops as well, but a very nice earthy profile to it. In terms of finish on this one, it's not super long. It's not massively bitter. It's got enough that, yeah, you're drinking an IPA. It's clear, there's some bitters there, but it's not the type that linger all over the palate, that have such intensity that it's driving out the finish an absurdly long amount of time. So I'm going to go ahead, jump back in here for a second sip. We'll let everything re-intensify, see if I missed anything, and I'll see if it extends the finish after re-intensifying on the palate here. But very nice beer, very tasty. Yeah, nice earthy punch to it. There's a little bit of citrus. It does taste a little kind of grapefruit rindy, a little bit. It's not hugely citrus forward. It's still dominant earthy, but there is a little bit of a citrus vibe to it as well. And that is certainly coming from that citra hop. It does impart aromas of that very hugely, and often you'll also pick it up in the flavor profile. And since there's only 2 hops here, it's not really fighting against a massive hop bill. They're really sticking out what they're bringing to the table. So you got this little citrus rind, citric oil quality, and this earthy underpinning too. So on second sip after it re-intensifies, I can tell you that that citrus quality is definitely popping out and sticking around a lot longer. And the citrus kind of rind and citrus oil, bitters, and hop profiles tend to also pair very well with underlying earthy kind of profiles. It binds very well together. It works very harmoniously in the flavor profile. I really like it. And I can tell you, on second sip, there is a vast and noticeable increase in the amount of lingering bitters and the perception of bitters. Indeed, on second sip, it feels a lot more bitter forward than it did on the first sip. This is still not, it's not a Stone Ruination IPA kind of thing, 100 plus IBUs, but it's definitely more noticeable. If I were just to take a stab at where I think the IBUs fall, at least from a perception standpoint, I would say 40 to 50. So if you're a super craving the bitter hophead, I don't think it's so low that you would be disappointed. But if you really don't like super bitter IPAs, you like the more New England style that focus on the other flavor character traits of hops, but are less dominant on the bitter side, I don't think this is one that would kind of put you off. I think it's very well balanced in terms of what hop qualities are brought to the table in an IPA format. And certainly, this Phantasm powder is really neat. The aromas that you get out of this are just massive. They are just massive. It smells like a beer that would be, has some kind of crazy high price tag with many years aged in something and at least double the volume of malts and ingredients in it. It really makes the aroma pop. It is so pleasant and just so bold and pungent. It just gets you ready for what you're about to jump into when you do finally take that first sip. And in terms of the finish, again, we talked about this on second sip with the intensifying of the bitters. That definitely is translating to the finish as well. I would say, yet again, this is still not one of those super long finishes, but the bitters are lingering a little bit longer once you get to second sip. I would say it's hovering in the average, maybe high end of average range for a typical IPA. But what I can say about it is it's absolutely delicious. Anchorage does a great job with all of the beers I've had from them, and they really do seem to have a keen eye on balance, and that's so critical in any beer, including an IPA. The balance of the aroma and the flavor and the bittering profile is a very big thing. West Coast subcategory, they're their own animal. New England style subcategory, they're their own animal. But when you're talking just a standard IPA here, this is just incredibly well crafted. It's very refreshing. This is classic IPA at its finest, with these big aromas to go along with it and big in-your-face flavors to go along with it. It's just an absolute treat. I'm a big fan of this one. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we'll get this one ranked from top to bottom. All right, so now we're going to get this beer ranked. This was Anchorage Brewing Company's Beneath the Water, a double dry hopped IPA clocking in at 6.4% ABV, and this one did have added phantasm powder. Bit of a mouthful. Anchorage Brewing Company, of course, based in Anchorage, Alaska. So starting with the aroma, I have come to expect this with beers that have phantasm powder. It is just an absolute aroma increaser. It just really, the beer by itself probably would have had a very nice aroma to it, but this phantasm powder just draws out so much aroma, it's incredible. I mean, these are beers that at a 6.4% ABV have aromas as pungent from as far away as a big barrel-aged barley wine or stout. Absolutely incredible. This one smelled amazing. Nice blend of citrus on the nose, some nice underlying earthiness. It smelled fantastic. Extremely pungent. Aroma gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the taste, I absolutely loved the flavor profile of this beer. It was dominated by earthiness, but after your second sip and everything kind of re-intensified, it became quite apparent that a lot of the citrus notes that were present in the aroma were also present in the flavor profile as well, and just an absolute delicious blend. We're talking very much rind and citric oils, so really paired well with that earthiness. And yeah, a decent kick of bitters, and largely dominated by that earthiness and that bit of that citrus rind, but very, very delicious beer indeed. Taste gets a 10 out of 10. For the body, this was really just kind of a light body. I mean, maybe just on the razor edge of medium light, which really for a nearly 6.5% ABV IPA is on the low end. It does get a 3 out of 10. For the mouthfeel, on the other hand, was a different story. It had the right amount of resistance for the ABV range. You could really feel it when you moved around. Agitation got very silky, very creamy. Mouthfeel was fantastic. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish on this one was really just high end of average. You know, this is not a big West Coast style IPA. It had a decent bit of bitters to where you could pick them up, but it wasn't overly pungently bitter, which is really the driving factor on any IPA. This was just high end of average. Finish gets a 6 out of 10. For the head and retention, this did okay. Again, we're really just talking average. It formed okay. It stuck around for just a little bit, and then it was gone with just the faintest pad floating on top. Average, 5 out of 10. For the appearance, this was a beautiful, bright, true golden yellow color. Had a little occlusion to it. It was absolutely lovely. The appearance gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance, I thought the balance was great between the malt bill, the yeast, the hops they chose, even that phantasm powder. I wouldn't have tweaked it further. Balance gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, subjectively, I really liked this beer. These IPAs with the phantasm powder, I expect to see more and more brewers doing it, and it's such a treat. Very new experience, and I've been a fan of all those that I've had to date. This one I loved. Feeling intangible, 10 out of 10. Finally, is an example of this style. So overall, this beer did pretty well in most categories, but it did lose some pretty big points in a few. Notably the body. The body on this one was lacking compared to a typical IPA in this ABV range. Finish, it is what it is, but it wasn't top tier, and the head and retention just was average. So that did drag the score down a little bit. Overall, I thought it was a very well done double dry hopped IPA. I did think it was above average, and it did get an 8 out of 10 as an example of this style, which brings the total score on Anchorage Brewing Company's Beneath the Water to an 82 out of 100. So this is still a well above average IPA. I drink a lot of IPAs. Some are better than others. I thought this was very enjoyable. For me, subjectively, I loved it, but I have to rank what I experienced, and it did have some categories that dragged the score down overall, but still well above average. If you haven't had a chance to try one of these beers with this phantasm powder, definitely recommend you do so. But as always, if you're looking at Anchorage for it, Tavour is the only way you're going to get your hands on their beers if you do not live in Alaska, as they do not distribute outside of Alaska except through Tavour. So well worth your time. At any rate, I loved the beer. I would recommend this one to any IPA fan, and certainly anybody that's a fan of Phantasm Powder. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit the bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.